There have been a few headlines recently about so-called trigger warnings given to archaeology students that their course content will include human remains. These headlines are largely sensationalist nonsense. Any teacher or educational institution will provide in advance a list of the contents of its courses to students on those courses. And it's not unreasonable to say to archaeology students, hey, you know some of this will involve you seeing and interacting with human remains. Because it will. Most of us have never made physical contact with human remains or examined them closely, so it seems entirely fair to set expectations in advance. Contrary to the media's usual appallingly weak grasp of academia, nobody is implying that these students or their teachers are being overly sensitive. On the other hand, shouldn't we perhaps try to be more sensitive about human remains? However long ago they died, they once lived. I've said in a previous video that I do recognise a sort of conflict between modern attitudes to death, that death is the end of a person's existence, and a more esoteric idea that humans are due fundamental respect even after death. The answer to that conflict I usually posit is that to treat the dead callously causes harm to the living, as it trains us to disregard suffering and the agency of others. Us being temporary residents on this planet rather than eternal souls bound on a journey through the limitless cosmos should be a realization that makes us more compassionate, but I'm not sure if it ever really does. On to mummies. It's generally accepted these days that to unwrap an Egyptian mummy is a bad thing. It's unnecessary because of modern scanning techniques. Actually, I say modern, the first X-ray of a mummy was performed 120 years ago. Anyway, unwrapping a mummy is an inherently destructive process. The mummy can't really be wrapped again with the same wrappings, and both the wrappings and the corpse within are often degraded simply by exposure to things like air and light. To be an archaeologist is often to dig up things nobody ever wanted you to dig up, and the ethics of the field are beyond my qualifications to discuss, but if the field as a whole is increasingly asking itself questions like, are there things we shouldn't be digging up? Should we stop putting human remains on display in museums? And so on, well, that could only be a good thing. There are plenty of folks who disagree with what I'm about to say, but there is such a thing as knowledge that isn't worth the price. Particularly since ancient history and archaeology serve vastly more the purpose of slaking our curiosity than solving pressing problems. Actually, let me correct myself. I think most people agree with the statement that there is knowledge that isn't worth the price. We probably just disagree on what prices aren't worth paying for what knowledge. I doubt anyone thinks it's worth demolishing the Great Pyramid, for example, just to get a precise count of the stones used to build it. Destructive practices are sadly part of Egyptology's legacy, archaeology's legacy as a whole. Even if every destructive practice stopped today, we would all still be benefiting from the more cavalier tomb robbers of generations past. My own channel exists to impart information, some of which can only have come to me through, ultimately, people with a lot of money paying other people to go where they were never supposed to, and see and touch things that shouldn't have been seen or touched. Hell, the only reason I'm able, sometimes, to give translations of Egyptian phrases and names is because Napoleon decided to launch an invasion of Egypt with the pretext of a scientific excursion, and the British showed up later to wave their big old flagpoles around and make even more of a mess. I'm aware of that, and I don't feel entirely comfortable about it, but there's no moral outcome to me boycotting all of Egyptology. I can't undo those things I wish hadn't been done. Okay, what does all this have to do with headlines about trigger warnings and oversensitive archaeology students? Well, these ancient, even Paleolithic human remains aren't treated the way your great-aunt Agatha would be. If someone died recently, they're only ever disinterred for forensic reasons, or, later on, to free up grave space. Something about the past seems to give us moral distance, and so it should in the case of, for example, generational trauma or grudges that go back centuries. We do need to let the past go, but that's not the same thing as ignoring our connection to it. If we're very lucky and make some very big decisions very soon, we'll be the ancient past one day. And while I personally don't care what happens to my bones as they constitute myself or my property, it would be better for the souls of future generations if they remembered when digging up my bones that they did once move about and have a name. So if we're getting more sensitive that past humans actually lived, and if we're putting an end to the callous disregard for sufficiently long ago people, I say that's a good change. Time's a funny thing because unlike space, we can't see through it in any direction. But really, honestly, advanced physics aside, all the past really is a foreign country. And if the last 100 years have taught us anything, it's that we should probably treat people from foreign countries just a little more the way we'd like to be treated. But actually, I've just realised something. I've been talking about mummies a fair bit on this channel, but I've never really defined what one is, so come back next time to see if I can stretch that to more than a minute of content. Thanks for watching, and thanks to everyone who keeps on liking and commenting and sharing my videos around, all that lovely stuff. It makes a huge difference, particularly since we're all much more likely to watch something recommended by a friend than recommended by the YouTube algorithm. The foil-suited future geniuses awestruck by my grave goods are my backers at patreon.com/armchairegypt, whose support continues to amaze me. Until next time, my fellow armchair Egyptologists, life, prosperity, and health to you all. Thanks for watching. Head over to my channel for more, or click here to see what the YouTube demons think you should watch next. I hope you'll consider subscribing. If you'd like to support and collaborate on the channel with me, go to patreon.com/armchairegypt. You can also join my Discord community, there's an invite link in the description.